Welcome back to Performance Starts Within. I'm recording today all the way from Ubud in Bali, Indonesia, after spending such an incredible week here. It's the week that I turned 36, so I'm closer to 40 than I am 30, but it's also the week that I decided that I wanted to rewrite a couple of the experiences and stories, heal some of the old wounds and some of the limiting beliefs and really deep grief that I was working through, and rebuild November to be something that was a little bit more of a celebration moving forward into the rest of my life. And so for those that have been following me for a little while, they understand that November's such a big month for me. And I'm going to go through a little bit about what that experience was like while I was in Ubud, but also what this means for me and the business moving forward. So November for me is the month I have my birthday, but it's also for the last 10 years been the month that I travel. It's been the month that I got engaged, the month that I got married, the month that I started IVF, the month that we renovated our home. And it was also the month that our marriage broke down and we separated, and I decided to pack up my son and I and move closer to family. So it's been a very, very big experience of memories. A lot of emotions came out of a November period. And so I really wanted to focus on using November as a way to help me become the best version of myself, and almost like a rebirth situation of what I wanted to do with myself and my life. So I decided to book this gorgeous villa in the middle of Ubud, where literally behind the camera you can't see it, or behind the mic you can't see, but it's this beautiful pool that goes into the jungle. And I'm filming today on my iPhone rather than in a studio, because I thought, why not do it from the middle of Ubud while we were here? And so some of the things that we got to do this week were pretty amazing. So I had a couple of podcast recordings here in Bali with the incredible Sarah, who you'll get to hear from in the coming weeks, and also Annalise McCarthy as well, who I have to say was one of the most impactful podcast episodes I've ever recorded. So I'm so excited that you get to hear that over the next couple of weeks whilst we're in Bali. But aside from the podcasting, one of the things that was something I really wanted to work on this year, and I kind of made it my mission a little bit to really work through some of the mindset that I had been avoiding for such a long time, avoiding some of the real ones from the police, avoiding some of the really deep wounds that I didn't realize I probably wasn't working through until I got down to the breakdown of my marriage. And it really highlighted some of the deep wounds of abandonment and rejection and failing and the life as we know it, and the grief of losing all of those things. And so over the last year, as I've tried to find my feet, and I closed down my creative agency, I packed up my little boy and we moved closer to family, and I went back to a day job to support us. And one of the things that I really committed to myself was using this year to find myself, because what I realized was that I didn't actually know who I was when I left. I immersed myself so much in my marriage, and I immersed myself so much in that kind of life with somebody, that when we didn't have it anymore, I had no idea who I was. If someone would ask me what I did outside of my job, I would have no idea what to say. I didn't have any hobbies. I was a mum, and I was working in business, and I was a wife. And so it was actually a really interesting year to work through some of these stories. And the way in which I did that was I worked with a mindset coach, which I absolutely needed going through that. And for those that are or have gone through a separation, having that support is so important, because the breakdown of our marriage was not nice. And so I had a mindset coach that I spoke to every week to work through all of those for a good 9 months. Actually, I spoke to her every single week, and it helped me through some of the hard times. It helped when I was packing up my home and my son. It helped when I was having my first Christmas, where I had to hand my son over on Christmas Day to give him to his dad, and how heartbreaking that was for the first time that I ever thought I would spend, Christmas away from him. The times of mediation and going through all the legal things that come up in separating, and also, working through things of, new relationships and things like that. And it was at the point where I had done enough of the mindset work to know that I was very self-aware. However, I was still very reactive in my body. And so when any conversation came up, as you can imagine, with the loved ones, the ones that trigger you the most, so my ex-husband or family or even like work situations, I felt it very much in my body, and I was still very reactive, which meant that like the mindset stuff was getting to its limit. And so I started to engage in other avenues as well to try and help through that over the last year. And so some of those avenues were engaging Sarah, which you'll hear from in an episode. And the reason I interviewed her was because of how impactful my time was with her. But Sarah is a hypnotherapist and breathwork practitioner. And so she helped me for the last 3 months leading up to Bali really start to get into my body and really get deep into some of the old anchor wounds that were in there. And so one of the things that I noticed was I had a physiological response to some of the triggers that would come up, especially when it came to things like abandonment, things like being seen or not being chosen. And there was a lot of deep hurt and grief that I kind of had to work through with her before coming to Bali and doing breath work. And it was funny because I originally booked Bali to see her to work through some of the old police wounds, because I thought the police wounds were the problem and it was something that I wanted to knock on the head, one last get it out of my body system. It's been 10 years since I've left now. And I actually realized over the last 3-month journey that that wasn't always the biggest problem. It was one of the things that anchored the problem, but some of the problems were compounding. It was that I'd reinforced some of these beliefs with other experiences. And so they were deeper and deeper and deeper because I just kept talking about it, or I kept being told it, or I kept being experiencing, and I was doing the same things. And so those chosen ones, the rejection ones, the fear of failing, the abandoned ones were really, really deep in the body. And when we started to bring them up, it was such an interesting experience. As one came up, another one kind of came up, and it started to release a lot of the tension and a lot of resistance. And so this was a 3-month journey for me because I felt like I had so much that I needed to work on. And I'm so glad that I did, because when I came to Bali, we actually did a 4-hour immersive experience where I did hypnotherapy to start with. And then I did breath work afterwards. And again, originally we were going to do police related trauma. And we actually did a lot around my ex-husband, and we did a lot around being chosen and the grief and the hurt and even the shame and the forgiveness that I particularly needed to let go of my part in that and take that radical responsibility in that season of life that we were in. And so that was such an impactful time for me at the beginning of this week that I actually made some radical changes, and resistance all of a sudden moved out of the way, and I showed up in ways that I'd never actually done before. And I think that's the biggest lesson in this, and why I wanted to share this with you, because every time I did a bit of mindset work in various spaces, it almost like took a layer off some of the problems or resistance that I was having. It was almost like the obstacle was moved out of the way. And as soon as I did that 4-hour breathwork session, I had some of the biggest resistance moved out of the way, that I was able to take some serious action in all sorts of places that I was originally scared about. And it actually worked out for the best in the end. So as an example, I actually booked to come to Bali, and I had allowed the influences of other people to book a resort down in Nusa Dua. And I was also afraid, because it was my first time traveling for the first time in Bali, and also solo traveling in general, that I wasn't meeting somebody over there. And so I booked Nusa Dua because I'd done a mastermind down there before. It was kind of familiar. I felt kind of safe. It was in a resort. And as soon as I landed and I got there, I felt so uncomfortable because it was not what I wanted. If you could imagine what it was like on a huge cruise ship, where it was like entertainment, which some people love that. And don't get me wrong, some people really love that. But it was, buffets. I couldn't even get a latte. Like, that's really important to me. Some people might hear that and go, yep, that's ridiculous. You're in Bali. But it was really important to me to have really good food, coffee, and experience, and relaxing. And I just felt very out of place. And I was kicking myself originally when I had booked this, because you spend a lot of money coming to the other side of the world and doing this experience. And so after I did this breathwork session with Sarah, driving back from where I was with her to this resort, I jumped on my phone and rebooked somewhere different. And originally I would have had a lot of resistance and guilt about that, because I was like, well, you've already paid for a resort. You come all this way, kind of suck it up. I would have told myself to suck it up. but I knew I wouldn't be happy. It wasn't the experience of healing that I actually wanted. And so I jumped on my phone, and this beautiful resort, which I actually wanted to book originally, which was very expensive in Ubud. I searched it to see if it was available, and it was. And it just so happened that it was Black Friday week and it was 50% off. And so I crash booked it and packed up and went the next day straight into this resort. And it was the best experience I've ever had in my life at this place. I'll pop the link below because it was one of my favorite resorts and places I've ever been. And it was so zen. You're literally in this villa overlooking the mountains. Even the spa downstairs is like open so that you face the jungle. It's just the best experience I've ever had in my life. And so one of the radical things around that was that I didn't feel guilt and shame about redoing that because I knew the experience that I wanted. I knew what it was going to cost, and I did it because that was something that I was committed to do for this year. And I knew I would be resentful of myself if I didn't. The other thing that I did was actually the drive between Nusa Dua and Ubud with my driver. I made some, I don't know what it was, but again, resistance was out of the way. I decided that I wanted to write again, and I really wanted to get some articles out there. And so when I was in Nusa Dua, I was on a call with Hardy Anderson's Pitch Like a Publicist. And we talked about some of the articles to write before Christmas. And I was so nervous to put myself back out there in that, I was having stories about being seen and showing up and fear of judgment, that after I got in the car and I did this breath work and I made my way to Ubud, between Nusa Dua and Ubud, I decided to write that article in the car. It was a 2-hour drive. And so I wrote out a rough version so that when I arrived in Ubud and was in my villa, I just did some revisions. I found the address of the editor at Mamma Mia and decided to, you know what, put it out into the universe, see what happens. Went to bed that night. And the next morning was my birthday, and I woke up and opened up my emails, and I had a reply from Mamma Mia saying that they would love to publish it leading up to Christmas and actually pay me to be published. And it was like the best birthday present in the world, but also just reiterated the resistance that kind of would have stopped me from putting it out there. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity, one, to have this beautiful experience in this resort, but also be able to put myself forward to have that opportunity again with Mamma Mia and be paid for it as well. And so that was, I guess, the experience of that breathwork session with Sarah, and just so many other things kind of fell into place while I was here. I did this beautiful water healing ceremony on my birthday because that's what I wanted to do as almost like a last wash away everything that's kind of happened in the last year. And this was like a rebirthing ceremony. And that was just absolutely beautiful, followed by some massages and facials that I didn't even know they booked for me. They sang happy birthday to me at the resort because, you're traveling by yourself for your birthday. Just so many things landed into place while I was here that I never thought was possible, purely because I did the work that moved all the noise, the fog out of the way. And so now it's the last day in Bali. I fly home tonight. And same thing, I've just sat and recorded 3 hours of videos for my new mastermind, Simplified to Scale, that I never thought I would do. And I just did it. I set up the camera, I recorded them, I built them in, I uploaded them, and now it's out there in the universe, which is so exciting. This little community that I had this dream of to be able to build and help support coaches build, and in the systems to make business so stupidly simple, it's now out there for everybody that can get access to it in a way that's really affordable as well, which I'm so proud of. So I guess why this is really important for you and why I really want to share this, and the evolution, I guess, of the last year, is that we sometimes underestimate what we can do in 12 months. And often it is also intangible to what people see on the outside. I honestly would not in a million years have thought I would be in this position this year. And no one else actually knows the journey that I've been on because I don't have physical items to show. Mindset and this inner journey and everything that has kind of happened and I've invested in the last year, no one can actually see. And sometimes that actually made me feel a bit guilty and shameful because I spent a lot of money and energy on getting myself to a position that I was extremely proud of. And I look back and go, 12 months ago, I was so broken, and I was wondering how I was going to solo parent on my own and wondering how I was going to show up for my son Archie. And I was grieving the life I had and the business I had to close down and the clients I had to just disappoint. And the guilt of returning to a day job. And now 12 months on, I honestly am so excited for the next year. And I've got so many things in place for this to be such an amazing business and podcast and experience and life. And I'm so excited to bring you on this journey. And today's just like a starting point. Unfortunately, flying back to Sydney, and I'm going to have to book this resort again. Hey, maybe for a mini mind or something like that where people can come and join me. But I just want to share this with you, that if you are wanting to really make some change in your life, 12 months can do wonders. And I want you to have a think about the ways in which you can, even just that 1% elevate, and get a coach that can help you work through some of these. Because in 1 week, I got published, I moved villas, I recorded a whole mastermind. And that is just 1 week after all of this breath work and all of this journey. Imagine what the next year could be. Imagine what the next year could be for our community. And I just want to leave you with that. I'll pop a couple of notes in the show notes so you can see the villa that I'm staying in. Jump onto my socials. I am Tash Miller. I'll be able to share some of the videos and photos so you can see as well the journey in Bali. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will catch you in the next one.